The alien battleship loomed over Earth, casting an ominous shadow across the blue marble of humanity's home. On board the ship, Commander Zaylock sneered at the viewscreen showing the planet below. These primitive humans dared to defy the mighty Krill Empire? They would soon learn the price of their insolence. Down on the surface, the leaders of Earth had gathered for an emergency summit. President John Stockton of the United States addressed the somber group. We all saw their message. The Krill demand our complete surrender and threaten to destroy us if we resist. But I say we don't give in to their bullying. Murmurs of assent came from the assembled presidents, prime ministers, and monarchs. The Krill had vastly superior technology and had already conquered a dozen worlds, but something about their arrogant ultimatum stirred a defiant fire in human hearts. Jiang Li, Premier Minister of China, spoke up. Humanity does not bow to tyrants, whether they come from Earth or the stars. If the Krill want a fight, then a fight they shall have. Similar declarations came from the other leaders. Premier Sergei Volkov of Russia pounded the table. We'll show those alien bastards what humans are made of. Our courage and spirit are more than a match for their fancy weapons. It seems we are agreed, said President Stockton grimly. We will not surrender. If the Krill want war, we'll give them a war like nothing their empire has ever seen before. As one, Earth began to ready itself for the battle to come. Militaries mobilized, missiles were armed, and civilians prepared to fight for their home. A species that had long been fractured by divisions of nation and ideology found itself united by a common threat. Across the globe, one phrase was on everyone's lips: remember Earth. On the Krill warship, Commander Zaylock was incredulous when he received the humans' response. They had refused to submit, and their transmission had included some very colorful profanity. Ready the plasma cannons, the commander growled to his weapons officer. It's time to show the humans the folly of their defiance. But as the battleship moved into attack position, alarms began to sound. Commander, we have multiple incoming projectiles from the planet's surface, called out the sensor operator. Impossible, spat Zaylock. These primitives don't have the capability to. His words were cut off as the ship suddenly lurched violently. The humans of Earth, in a desperate bid to defend their homeworld, had launched every nuclear missile they had at the alien vessel. Individually, the nukes were mere pinpricks against the Krill ship's advanced shields. But there were thousands of them, swarming in from every direction in a coordinated wave. The barrage hammered against the shields, straining them to the breaking point. Shields are failing, hull breaches on decks 4 through 19, came the frantic shouts of damage reports. Zaylock could only watch in disbelief as more and more missiles streaked in. Maybe there was more to these defiant humans than he thought. Across Earth, cheers erupted as the wounded alien ship listed away, trailing smoke and debris. It was only the opening salvo in what was sure to be a long and terrible war. But in that moment, for the very first time, both the humans and the Krill began to realize that the conquest of Earth would not be the easy victory the aliens had imagined. The humans would fight. And no matter the odds, they would never, ever surrender. As the battered Krill warship limped off to lick its wounds, a newfound feeling of hope stirred in the hearts of Earth's people. The impossible had happened, humanity had struck back against a seemingly unbeatable foe. As one world, they had found the courage to look an alien empire in the eye and refuse to back down no matter the consequences. It was a courage they would sorely need in the dark days ahead. The Krill would be back, that much was certain. But now Earth knew the taste of defiance, and the power of unity. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, one species, one world, unbroken and unbowed. The war for Earth had only just begun. In the wake of the initial Krill assault, Earth scrambled to shore up its defenses. The nuclear barrage had bought them some precious time, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the aliens returned in force. General Marcus Graves, newly appointed commander of Earth's hastily assembled defense forces, addressed his senior staff. We bloodied their nose, but we're under no illusions about what's coming. The Krill will be back, and they'll be pissed. We need to be ready. Around the world, human ingenuity and determination were pushed to their limits. Factories worked around the clock, churning out tanks, fighters, and missiles. Scientists and engineers raced to unlock the secrets of salvaged Krill technology, desperately seeking any advantage they could get. But the Krill had their own plans. On the Emperor's throne world, news of the humiliating setback at Earth had sent shockwaves through the court. Such defiance from a primitive species was unheard of, and could not go unanswered. The humans must be made an example of, snarled Emperor Zorgax, his scales flushed with rage. I want their cities burning, their people subjugated. We will crush their pathetic resistance and ensure no one ever again dares defy the Krill. A mighty armada was assembled, the largest the galaxy had ever seen. Battleships, troop carriers, and planet crackers, all the terrible might of the Krill Empire brought to bear against one upstart world. At the fleet's head was a gargantuan dreadnought, the personal flagship of the Emperor's most ruthless warlord. When the Krill returned to Earth, it was with a fury that seemed to set the very stars ablaze. Thousands of ships darkened the skies, raining fire and death upon the planet below. The humans must be made an example of, snarled Emperor Zorgax, his scales flushed with rage. I want their cities burning, their people subjugated. We will crush their pathetic resistance and ensure no one ever again dares defy the Krill. A mighty armada was assembled, the largest the galaxy had ever seen. Battleships, troop carriers, and planet crackers, all the terrible might of the Krill Empire brought to bear against one upstart world. At the fleet's head was a gargantuan dreadnought, the personal flagship of the Emperor's most ruthless warlord. When the Krill returned to Earth, it was with a fury that seemed to set the very stars ablaze. Thousands of ships darkened the skies, raining fire and death upon the planet below. The humans fought back with every weapon at their disposal, but it was like trying to hold back the tide. Cities crumbled, defenses were overrun, and armies were cut to pieces. The Krill were everywhere, their advanced weapons and battle-hardened troops carving a swath of destruction across the globe. But even in the darkest moments, with their world burning around them, the humans refused to give in. In shattered cities and scorched fields, they fought on. For every human who fell, 10 more stepped up to take their place, driven by a defiant fury that refused to be extinguished. They made the Krill bleed for every inch of ground, turned every city into a fortress, and made the aliens pay a steep price for their invasion. Amidst the chaos, stories of heroism and sacrifice became a rallying cry. A lone human fighter pilot, battling against impossible odds to bring down a Krill warship. A band of resistance fighters, striking from the shadows to sabotage enemy supply lines. A group of civilians on a remote island, repelling wave after wave of Krill assaults. But for all their courage, the humans were slowly losing ground. The Krill were simply too strong, their technology too advanced. Earth cities lay in ruins, its people battered and bloodied. It seemed only a matter of time before the resistance was finally crushed completely. On board his flagship, Warlord Karzan watched the bombardment of Earth's last major stronghold with satisfaction. These humans had proven surprisingly stubborn in their defiance, but in the end, it would all be for nothing. Earth would burn, its people would be enslaved, and the Krill Empire would remind the galaxy why it was not to be crossed. As the dreadnought began moving into position for the final assault, Karzan allowed himself a moment of anticipation. Soon, very soon now, Earth's last embers of resistance would be stamped out forever. Down on the surface, General Graves surveyed the hellscape that had once been London. Flames reflected in his eyes as he hefted his rifle and turned to the grim-faced soldiers around him. This is it, people. Maybe our last stand. So let's make it a good one. Let's show these Krill bastards what happens when you push humanity too far. Let's make them regret ever setting foot on our world. A resounding cheer went up from the assembled troops as they prepared to meet the invaders head-on. All they had left was their courage and their refusal to submit. Against the might of an empire, it didn't seem like much. But sometimes, raw defiance could achieve the impossible. The final battle for Earth was about to begin, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The streets of London had become a war zone. Krill troops swarmed through the rubble-strewn corridors, their energy weapons casting eerie shadows in the smoke-choked air. But for every alien that pushed forward, there was a human defender ready to meet them. General Graves led from the front, his rifle barking as he rallied his troops. "Hold the line," he shouted over the din of battle. "We give them nothing. Not one step back." The humans fought with a ferocity born of desperation. They knew they were outgunned and outmatched, but they also knew they were fighting for everything they held dear. Every street, every building, became a battleground as they made the Krill pay for every inch with blood. In the skies above, the remnants of Earth's Air Force engaged the Krill ships in a dizzying dance of death. Pilots pushed their craft to the limits, using every trick and tactic they knew to try to even the odds. They were hopelessly outnumbered, but they fought on with grim determination. On board the Krill flagship, Warlord Curzon was growing increasingly frustrated. These primitives should have been crushed by now, yet they continued to resist. He slammed a clawed fist down on the arm of his command chair. "Enough of this. Deploy the heavy destroyers. Raze their cities to the ground." But even as the Krill escalated their assault, the humans refused to buckle. In the heart of London, a small squad of soldiers had managed to breach the perimeter of the Krill's forward command post. They fought their way inside, determined to strike a blow against the invaders. Sergeant Jane Hawkins led the charge, her eyes hard as flint. She had seen too many friends fall, too many innocent lives snuffed out. The Krill had to pay. As they battled through the corridors, Jane and her team planted explosives at key structural points. If they couldn't drive the Krill out, then maybe they could bury them under the rubble. Back on the streets, General Graves was in the thick of the fighting when an urgent comm signal came through. "Sir, we've lost contact with Sergeant Hawkins' team." Their last transmission indicated they were inside the Krill command post. Graves' jaw clenched. He knew what Hawkins and her soldiers were trying to do. It was a brave plan, maybe their only chance to turn the tide. But it was also likely a one-way trip. He keyed his comm, "All units, this is General Graves. We've got friendlies inside the Krill perimeter, giving us a chance we can't pass up. Everyone, push forward. Give them everything you've got." As word spread of the daring infiltration, the human forces surged forward with renewed determination. If their comrades were willing to sacrifice themselves for a shot at the Krill command, then the least they could do was have their backs. Inside the command post, Jane and her team had fought their way to the central control room. They were battered and bloody, but still in the fight. As Krill reinforcements closed in, Jane keyed the final sequence on the detonator. She looked around at her soldiers, seeing the resolve in their eyes. "It's been an honor," she said simply. The explosion ripped through the command post like the fist of an angry god. The blast shook the city, sending Krill soldiers flying and shattering their lines. For a moment, the tide of battle seemed to hang in the balance. General Graves saw the opening and he seized it with both hands. "Forward," he roared, leading the charge himself. "For Earth. For everyone we've lost. For Hawkins and her team. No mercy." The human forces crashed into the reeling Krill like a tidal wave. Fueled by grief, rage, and raw defiance, they smashed into the aliens' crumbling lines and sent them tumbling back. It was the turning point Earth had desperately needed, bought with the blood and sacrifice of heroes. As the Krill fell back in disarray, a cheer began to rise from the human ranks. Against all odds, they had struck a decisive blow. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, the end no longer seemed certain. High above, Warlord Curzon watched the rout of his forces with seething fury. The humans had made a grave mistake. Now, his own honor was at stake, and he would see Earth burn for this humiliation. The true wrath of the Krill was about to be unleashed. The destruction of the Krill command post had thrown the aliens into temporary disarray, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time before they regrouped. General Graves knew they had to press their advantage while they had it. "We've got them on the back foot, but we need to hit them again before they can recover," he told his officers. "I want strike teams ready to move on any targets of opportunity. We keep the pressure on, never give them a chance to catch their breath." Across the globe, human forces launched daring raids against Krill positions. Supply depots were hit, communication hubs taken out, anything to further disrupt the aliens' operations. Each success, no matter how small, fueled the growing sense that maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance. But Warlord Curzon had no intention of giving the humans anything. Enraged by the loss of his command post and the setbacks his forces had suffered, he ordered a full-scale bombardment of Earth's major population centers. If the humans wanted to fight dirty, then he would show them the consequences. The skies over Earth's cities lit up as Krill warships rained down hellfire. Buildings were reduced to rubble, entire neighborhoods vaporized in an instant. The death toll was staggering, the destruction beyond comprehension. In the midst of this carnage, a small group of human scientists were racing against time. Led by Dr. Elizabeth Simmons, they had been working tirelessly to unlock the secrets of captured Krill technology. And now, they believed they had found something, a way to even the playing field. "It's a long shot, but it's the best chance we've got," Dr. Simmons told General Graves. "If we can get this working, it could change everything." The device was a prototype energy shield, reverse-engineered from Krill tech. In theory, it could provide protection against the aliens' devastating weapons. But it was untested, and they only had enough resources to deploy it in one place. General Graves made the call. "Get it to New York. The Krill are hitting it hard, and if we lose the city, we lose a major rallying point. If this shield works, it could buy us the time we need." As the shield was rush-transported to New York, the city was in the fight of its life. Krill troops had landed in force, and street battles raged across the boroughs. The human defenders fought with everything they had, but they were being pushed back block by block. Just when all seemed lost, the energy shield flickered to life. A shimmering dome spread out over the heart of the city, just as a wave of Krill bombardment came crashing down. The Krill weapons' fire slammed into the shield, and dissipated harmlessly. For a moment, both sides could only stare in shock. Then, a cheer went up from the human lines. The shield was working. New York was holding. The news of New York's stand spread like wildfire. Across the planet, humanity's spirits soared. If they could hold New York, then they could hold anywhere. The tide was turning. But Warlord Curzon was not about to let a bunch of primitives best him. If this new human technology could resist his weapons, then he would simply have to crush them the old-fashioned way, with overwhelming force. He gathered his most elite troops, the most ruthless and battle-hardened veterans of the Krill forces. These were the Emperor's own, the most feared warriors in the galaxy. Curzon would lead them himself, descend to the surface, and personally grind humanity's resistance into dust. As troop carriers full of the Emperor's own descended on New York, General Graves knew this would be the decisive battle. If they could hold here, against the Krill's best, then it would break the alien spirit. But if they fell, it could be the beginning of the end. He looked around at the tired, battered, but fiercely determined faces of his soldiers. They had come so far, sacrificed so much. They would not fail now. Not here, not with everything on the line. "This is it, people," Graves said, his voice ringing with resolve. "This is where we show the Krill, and the whole damn galaxy, what humanity is made of. This is where we draw the line and say no further. This is where we hold. A roar of agreement rose from the assembled troops. They were ready. Come what may, they would stand, they would fight. For Earth, for the fallen, for the future. The ultimate battle was about to begin, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The streets of New York had become a war zone unlike any the world had ever seen. The Emperor's own, the most elite of the Krill warriors, had landed in the heart of the city and were carving a swath of destruction through the human defenses. But for every block they took, the humans made them pay in blood. Warlord Karzan led from the front, his personal energy blade cutting down any human unfortunate enough to cross his path. He had to admit, grudgingly, that these primitives were proving to be more formidable opponents than he had anticipated. But no matter. They would fall, like all the others before them. General Graves was in the thick of the fighting, rallying his troops with every step. The energy shield was holding for now, but the Krill were relentless. It was only a matter of time before they found a way through. In a command bunker deep underground, Dr. Simmons and her team were working frantically. They had an idea, a desperate gamble that might turn the tide. But they needed more time. General, we think we've found a way to amplify the shield, to push the Krill back, Dr. Simmons said over the comm, but we need to divert power from the city grid. We need you to hold them just a little longer. Graves gritted his teeth. Hold them longer. Easier said than done. But what choice did they have? You'll get your time, Doctor. Do what you need to do. Above ground, the battle raged on. The human forces fought with a desperate fury, throwing everything they had at the Krill invaders. Tanks rumbled through the streets, infantry squads engaged in brutal close-quarters combat. The very air seemed to burn with the intensity of the fighting. Amidst the chaos, a young soldier named Private Michael Thompson found himself face to face with Warlord Karzan himself. The alien towered over him, his energy blade humming with deadly power. But Michael didn't hesitate. He charged forward, firing his weapon, determined to buy his comrades even a moment's respite. Karzan was taken aback by the human's audacity. He swatted the soldier aside with contemptuous ease, but in that moment of distraction, he didn't see the other humans taking aim. A barrage of fire hit him from all sides, and for the first time in his long career of conquest, Karzan felt pain. Enraged, the warlord redoubled his assault. He would make these upstart primates pay for their insolence. But even as he fought, he couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for their bravery, their unwillingness to submit. In the command bunker, Dr. Simmons and her team were racing against time. They were rerouting power, modifying the shield frequencies, doing everything they could to give the device the boost it needed. It was a long shot, but it was humanity's best hope. On the streets, General Graves was leading a desperate last stand. The Krill were pushing hard, and the human lines were starting to buckle. They just needed to hold on a little longer. Just when all seemed lost, a brilliant light flared out from the center of the city. The energy shield, amplified by Dr. Simmons' modifications, was pulsing with renewed power. The Krill weapon's fire that had been slowly wearing it down now rebounded harmlessly, and then, incredibly, the shield began to expand. The expanding field slammed into the Krill forces like a physical blow. They were pushed back, their advance halted in its tracks. For a moment, both sides could only stare in shock. And then, the humans charged. Bolstered by this sudden turn of events, the human forces surged forward. They crashed into the reeling Krill like a tidal wave, driving them back street by street. Leading the charge was Private Thompson, battered but unbowed, rallying his fellow soldiers with a cry of "For Earth." Warlord Karzan found himself beset on all sides. His elite warriors were falling, and the accursed human energy field was pressing in around him. For the first time in his life, Karzan felt something he had never known before: fear. As the Krill lines crumbled and the invaders were driven back, a cheer began to rise from the human ranks. Against all odds, they had held. They had faced the worst the Krill Empire had to offer, and they had emerged victorious. But even as they celebrated, General Graves knew this was only the beginning. The Krill would be back, and Earth would need to be ready. But for now, humanity had shown the galaxy that they would not go quietly into the night. They would fight, they would endure, and they would never, ever surrender. The war for Earth's future was far from over, but today, at least, they had hope. In the aftermath of the battle for New York, the world began to catch its breath. The Krill had been dealt a serious blow, their aura of invincibility shattered. For the first time, it seemed that the tide of the war might be turning. But General Graves knew there was no time for complacency. The Krill would regroup, come back stronger. Earth needed to be ready. Under his direction, the energy shield technology was quickly replicated and deployed to other major cities around the globe. Dr. Simmons and her team worked around the clock, refining and improving the design. It wasn't a perfect defense, but it gave humanity a fighting chance. At the same time, Earth's armies began to go on the offensive. Armed with captured Krill weapons and their own ingenuity, they launched raids against alien strongholds, disrupting supply lines and keeping the invaders off balance. Leading many of these raids was Private Michael Thompson, now a hero after his stand against Warlord Curzon. His bravery and tenacity had become an inspiration to people around the world, a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit. But the Krill Empire was far from beaten. On the throne world, Emperor Zorgax seethed with rage at the news of his army's defeats. He summoned his most trusted advisors, demanding a plan to crush the human resistance once and for all. "The humans have proven more resilient than we anticipated," the Emperor growled. "But they are still primitives. We will overwhelm them with numbers, grind them down until nothing is left. This world will be made an example of." Under the Emperor's orders, the Krill began to mass their forces for a final, all-out assault on Earth. Ships from across the Empire were called in, armies raised from a dozen conquered worlds. It would be the greatest armada the galaxy had ever seen, an unstoppable tide of destruction. As news of the impending attack reached Earth, a sense of grim determination settled over the planet. This would be the final battle, the one that would decide the fate of humanity. Win or lose, there would be no second chances. General Graves conferred with leaders from around the world, formulating a plan. They would meet the Krill head-on, throw everything they had at the invaders. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. It was a desperate gamble, but what choice did they have? As the Krill Armada entered Earth's solar system, the planet's defenses swung into action. The energy shields flared to life, a shimmering barrier against the alien onslaught. Earth's own spacecraft, cobbled together and outfitted with scavenged tech, lifted off to meet the enemy. The battle that followed was like nothing the universe had ever witnessed. The Krill ships blackened the sky, their weapons scorching the very air. But humanity met them with a fury born of desperation, striking back with everything they had. In the heart of the battle, Michael Thompson found himself in the thick of the fighting once again. His craft darted and weaved among the Krill ships, dealing damage where it could. But there were so many of them. Just when all seemed lost, a new player entered the fray. Unknown ships, sleek and silver, dropped out of hyperspace and opened fire on the Krill. It was the Galactic Council, the governing body of the free species of the galaxy. They had come to stand with humanity. With the Council's reinforcements, the tide of the battle began to turn. The Krill, so used to being the conquerors, found themselves outflanked and outfought. Their ships began to fall, their lines crumbling. And in the heart of the enemy fleet, a small team of human and Council special forces fought their way onto the bridge of the Krill flagship. There, they confronted Emperor Zorgax himself. The Emperor was a formidable foe, but he was no match for the combined strength of human and alien warriors. In a final, desperate struggle, Zorgax was defeated, his reign of terror ended at last. With the Emperor's fall, the Krill Empire began to collapse. Their armies, so long held together by fear and oppression, turned on each other. The invaders were routed, driven back to the stars. Earth had emerged victorious, but at a terrible cost. Cities lay in ruins, millions had died. But as the smoke of battle cleared, a new dawn began to rise. Humanity had proven itself to the galaxy, had shown that it would not be cowed or conquered. As the people of Earth began to rebuild, they did so with a new sense of unity, of purpose. They had faced the greatest threat imaginable, and they had prevailed. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity would face it together, unbowed and unbroken. The war was over. But the story of Earth, and its place in the stars, was only just beginning. Years had passed since the Great War, since humanity had stood on the brink of annihilation and fought back against all odds. The scars of that terrible conflict were still visible, in the rebuilt cities and the haunted eyes of the veterans. But Earth had endured, and more than that, it had thrived. Under the leadership of General Graves, now elected as the first global president, humanity had stepped out into the stars. They had taken their place among the galactic community, forging alliances, trading knowledge and resources. Earth became a hub of diplomacy and cooperation, a shining beacon of what could be achieved when species worked together. At the forefront of this new era was Michael Thompson, the hero of the war. He had traded his soldier's uniform for a diplomat's robes, working tirelessly to build bridges between worlds. His bravery and compassion had made him a legend, a symbol of the best of humanity. But not all was well in the galaxy. The fall of the Krill Empire had left a power vacuum, and there were always those eager to fill it. Rogue warlords, pirate fleets, and ambitious species all vied for control, threatening the fragile peace that had been so hard won. As new conflicts flared across the stars, Earth found itself once again called to stand in defense of freedom. But this time, they did not stand alone. The allies they had gained, the friends they had made, stood with them. When a powerful alien warlord known as the Ravager began a campaign of conquest, it was Michael Thompson who led the diplomatic efforts to build a coalition against him. Species that had once been bitter enemies now fought side by side, united by a common cause. The war against the Ravager was long and costly, but in the end, the Allies prevailed. The warlord's armies were shattered, his strongholds broken. The galaxy had been saved, not by one species, but by many, working as one. In the aftermath of this latest victory, Earth and its allies stood at a crossroads. They could retreat back to their own worlds, focus inward. Or they could continue to stand together, to build something greater. Under Michael Thompson's guidance, they chose the latter path. A new organization was born, the Galactic Alliance, dedicated to preserving peace, fostering cooperation, and standing against tyranny wherever it arose. As the years turned into decades, Earth's role in the galaxy continued to grow. Human scientists unlocked the secrets of advanced technology, human diplomats forged new alliances and trade routes. A new generation grew up, one that had never known a time when humanity stood alone against the stars. But there were still challenges to face, still threats to overcome. There were still those who looked upon the rise of humanity with envy and fear, who sought to tear down what had been built. When a mysterious new enemy emerged from the depths of unknown space, wielding technology far beyond anything seen before, it was the Galactic Alliance that stood against them. And at the forefront of that alliance, as always, was Earth and its people. The war was the greatest test humanity had faced since the days of the Krill, a struggle not just for survival, but for the very soul of the galaxy. But they did not flinch, did not falter. With Michael Thompson, now an old man but still a leader of unmatched wisdom and charisma, at the helm, they fought with all the strength, all the courage, that had carried them through the trials of the past. And in the end, as they always had, they prevailed. As the dust of this latest conflict settled, Earth stood tall among the stars, a testament to the indomitable will of humanity. They had faced the darkness, time and again, and they had emerged stronger for it. The journey had been long, the sacrifices immense. But as humanity looked out across the vast expanse of the galaxy, as they saw the countless worlds and species that they now called friends, they knew that it had all been worth it. For in the face of the greatest adversities, in the darkest of times, they had found something more precious than any treasure, more powerful than any weapon. They had found unity, purpose, and an unbreakable spirit that would carry them forward, to whatever challenges lay ahead. Earth's story, humanity's story, was far from over. It was only just beginning, a tale of courage, resilience, and the boundless potential of a species united. And the galaxy would never be the same.